Hi, good evening everyone. This is Shivprasad Yadav. In this presentation, we will discuss about regional rural banks. So before going to regional rural banks, there are few things which we are supposed to discuss in detail. What is the reason behind establishing regional rural banks? So what is the reason actually? And on what basis they are established, what are the issues are there at present, and revival of regional rural bank. So first of all, we'll focus on the concept. No, I'm not going to start with the very first regional rural bank was established in 1975 on the basis of an ordinance released by the President of India, and then we have RRB Act in 1976. It's not like that. There is something which we are supposed to discuss about the establishment of regional rural banks. For example, regional rural banks are established in 1975-76. So by that time, first nationalization of banking was over, which means that already 14 banks were there, nationalized banks were there, along with State Bank of India group to help out, to sort the problems or to sort out the problems of the farmers or agricultural credit or rural development, whatever the things you take, there is a structure. But again, regional rural banks, a new concept was introduced, a new concept was established in the name of regional rural banks. The main reason behind establishment of regional rural banks is it is the cultural divide, because whatever may be the extent the commercial banks may penetrate into rural India, but the feel of the people, the attraction of the people is not towards the commercial banks. That is the cultural divide. The commercial banking structure is more suitable for towns, cities, and urban thing, so which is not actually suitable for the rural India. So, as there is a cultural divide between the urban and the rural India, there is a separate segment of banking is required. That separate segment of banking came in the form of establishment of regional rural banks. So that is the background behind establishment of regional rural banks. So in simple words, there is a cultural divide between the urban India and the rural India. Whatever the commercial segment is there, that commercial segment, commercial banking segment is more towards towns, cities, and it is actually an urban thing. It is not a rural thing. If you take lead bank scheme, up to whatever may be the extent the commercial bank may try to penetrate into the rural India, the feel of the people, the culture of the people, it is not suitable, is not towards this commercial banking segment. It is more towards, you can say that it is more towards cooperative segment, cooperative banking segment. So this is the reason, the cultural divide is the reason behind the requirement of separate segment called regional rural banks establishment. So that is the reason. So first part we are done, and the second part, what is the basis? The base is, it is established on the basis of an ordinance. It is not established on the base, it is not directly established on the basis of an act actually. For example, we have RBI Act 1934 and then we have RBI 1935. But in this case, the first bank was established in 1975. First bank established, then we have an act. But in the case of Reserve Bank of India 1934 Act and 1935, we have the bank. So first there should be an act, then there should be an establishment of bank. In this case of regional rural banks, it is reverse. First there is an establishment of bank on the basis of ordinance. Then we have an act, 1976 Act. So the base for regional rural banks is It is not an act, actually, it is an ordinance. So this part is also done. Now, what are the issues and challenges? We all know that whatever the agricultural segment is there, it is, when compared to all other productive segments of the industry, which can do more by taking bank loans, it is somewhat relativistically non-productive. You can consider it as a non-productive segment. So as it is a non-productive segment, there is a possibility of more non-performing assets. So that is the biggest issue with recovering the loan, is the biggest issue with the regional rural banks. That's why at one time there were huge number of regional rural banks, and by 2021 the number has reduced gradually. So one of the most key things related to regional rural banks is issues and challenges. If you consider it, it is nothing but non-performing assets concept only, and whatever the structure of the regional rural bank is there. For example, the structure of regional rural bank is somewhat like this. The share of central government is 50%, the share of state government is 35%, and whatever the sponsored bank is there, its share is 15%. So again, there is a structural thing is required, a more problem solving structure is required. In this kind of structure, whatever the share of 50% of union government, or 30% of the state, 35% of the state government, or 15% of a sponsored bank, this is one major reason behind, and one major issue behind the functioning of regional rural banks. This also has to be sorted out. And from 2011 onwards, there is a concept called revival of regional rural banks in and around 1340 crores. The government is planning to pump into RRBs for the revival of regional rural banks, and this pumping is based on the recommendations of the committee KC Chakravarti. So that is also important in examination point of view. KC Chakravarti committee. So in 1340 crores, 50% has to be pumped by the union government, but before that, whatever the sponsored bank is there, it is supposed to pump 15% of this 1340 crores. That's why there is confusion in beginning of revival of regional rural banks, although the concept was started in 2011. But to conclude, regional rural banks is the perfect structure for rural and agricultural development, or agricultural and rural development. Whatever the structure is there, it is one way, it is fine, but in another way, it is not that much fine in recovering loans, or the working of these regional rural banks and the penetration of these commercial banks. They are not going hand in hand. So at present, the immediate need is the revival of regional rural banks is required at present. While explaining priority sector lending concept, I have told you that based on COVID-19 concept, with respect to health infrastructure and education infrastructure, there is a possibility of a question from priority sector lending. Similarly, there is a possibility of one question from regional rural banks, because the government is thinking of government is working on actually on doubling farmers income. So whenever doubling farmers incomes comes, these banking segments which are very close to farmers also play a major role. So keep an eye on this concept, which is somewhat important when compared to all other topics. It is important like priority sector lending concept. So keep an eye on this concept also. Thank you.